Hello, beautiful. I'm Amy Eric, founder of Madison Reed, a hair color company I named after my daughter. Forget everything you know about hair color. The mess, the smell, the hassle, the damage. We're female-founded and female-led. We've transformed the hair color experience with ingredients that care for your hair and award-winning color on your terms, at home or at our hair color bars. The future of hair color is here at Madison Reed.
Hey now.
Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road.
Hey now. Hi everybody. Welcome to Scott Box After 9. I got to tell you about my day. I apologize that this episode is late. Here's how the Scott Fox day is shaping up on this beautiful Thursday. I, this morning, didn't do my FM radio show on Light 92.1. Didn't do it today. I had to fill in there because I got invited to a great event. It was an interfaith prayer breakfast. Faith is one of those interesting things. It's kind of like politics, you know? Some people are very, very vocal about their political leanings, and some people are very quiet about them. Same with faith. But, you know, there was 500 people at this event this morning at the Burlington Convention Center, and it was really, really nice to start off the day that way. So I'm glad I got to do that, and I thought I would be enjoying the rest of the day off and just do the pod from home here, like normal. And then I got asked to fill in this afternoon on Z1035 in Toronto. So I'm doing a radio show today. It's just going to be afternoon instead of morning. And I apologize again for the late pod today, but it really was for a good reason. I'm feeling fulfilled. It was real nice to get to that prayer breakfast this morning. On this episode, which is going to be a little bit shorter because now my day just got a little bit longer, I'm going to try and bring you as much information as I can, and I'm getting ready for the listener DMs episode tomorrow. If there's a DM you want to send in, something you want me to talk about, it doesn't need to be political, by the way. We can talk about whatever you want. That's the beautiful part about Listener DMs Friday. Send me whatever you want. I will weigh in, and we'll have a good pod episode tomorrow. Now let's jump into today. There is that hantavirus that is still on that ship that is drifting out off the coast of Africa right now. The World Health Organization has weighed in. What's this guy's name? We've been hearing from this guy since COVID. What is this guy's name? Dr. Tedros, I think it is. He is from the World Health Organization. Here's him talking about the hantavirus.
Given the incubation period of the Andes virus, which can be up to 6 weeks, it's possible that more cases may be reported. While this is a serious incident, WHO assesses the public health risk as low. It also shows why the international health regulations exist and how they work. WHO is working with multiple governments and partners on the response under those regulations. Our priorities are to ensure the affected patients receive care, that the remaining passengers on the ship are kept safe and treated with dignity, and to prevent any further spread of the virus.
Well, yeah, one thing we got to do is make sure this thing doesn't spread, because one thing we do not need, not right now, is another pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that this could be a pandemic, but the World Health Organization, that's their time to shine when we do have a big health issue. How is this thing spreading from person to person? This is a virus that typically is spread through, I'm told, rat droppings. How is this spreading from person to person? And why are we letting anybody off that ship if there's a possibility that the virus could continue to spread? Let's hear more from the World Health Organization news conference. This here is another representative, no name on the screen, so I'm not exactly sure who it is, but this is talking about protocol on the ship.
We know on board they have taken some precautions to try to minimize the risk. What they have advised on board is disinfection of the rooms. They have confined people to their cabins and providing food and water, and they have asked, as a precautionary measure for anyone leaving their room, to wear a medical mask. We certainly advise people who are caring for those who are suspected of this Andes virus or hantaviruses to wear a higher level of personal protective equipment. That guidance has been given to the people on board, but also there are the 2 patients that are in hospital in the Netherlands, and there's a patient in ICU in South Africa.
Let's keep in mind here, this virus was completely contained to the ship, but people got off the ship and now the virus is in other countries. Have we not learned anything? I mean, I want to make sure that these people get all of the care they need and deserve, but still, we don't want this virus spreading. One more from the World Health Organization.
And any vacuum, any space which is not covered actually gives advantage to the virus. And the best immunity we have is solidarity. So because of the event that's happening now, and both Argentina and the US are affected, I think they will reconsider their decisions because they can see how important universality is for health security. Because viruses don't care about our politics, and they don't care about our borders, and they don't care about, all the excuses that we may have. So I hope this could be a good lesson for the whole world, because solidarity is our best immunity. I repeat.
Using this as an opportunity to try and shame the U.S. for pulling out of the World Health Organization. I don't know. I talk to a lot of people who are still burned about the way COVID went down, and they really don't want anything to do with the World Health Organization either here in Canada. Now, we are still part of it. I'm very curious to see where this one goes, and I will keep following it right here on Scott Fox After 9. Now, let's move on. One of the things that I talked about on yesterday's episode was Honda. They're not going ahead with that EV battery factory in Alliston, Ontario. The Prime Minister was doing a news conference yesterday, and he got asked about that.
Minister Mark Carney. Honda is reportedly suspending plans for a $15 billion EV plant in Ontario indefinitely. Has the government been informed of this decision, and how do you convince companies to invest here in Canada when there's so much global uncertainty?
Well, thank you for your question. First, we're in constant contact with all the major automakers, like in other words, currently producing in Canada, and potential. And that includes Honda. So we're in discussions with them constantly. And look, there's no announcement today, to be clear. How do we convince companies to invest in Canada? A couple of things. One is our country has twice the rate of investment, foreign direct investment, than the United States, adjusted for the size of our population, twice the rate. We're at the highest level of foreign direct investment in Canada for 20 years. What you're seeing today, thank you, grâce aux travailleurs et travailleuses ici, les innovateurs, grâce à Airbus, is a huge vote of confidence in the innovation and commitment of the Quebec government, but of the workers here. How do we continue to convince and continue to increase that investment? Connectivity, to borrow Tony's word, those trade deals, those 20 deals, the deal with ASEAN, the deal with India, moving forward like that. Confidence, le mot de Madame la Première ministre du Québec, l'audace. Ça, c'est le moment pour l'audace. It's the moment to be bold, to build big, to have confidence, move forward, open up. That's what we're doing, and we'll continue to get that investment despite the efforts of the Americans. Thank you.
The Prime Minister there, when he goes in and out of French, I find that's when he is struggling for the right words to say, or he knows what he's saying is not going to play well, so he mixes it up and it makes it hard to follow for people that are watching on television or listening online. He didn't really say what we're going to do to try and attract more foreign investment. Could it be that maybe we need to lower taxes? Could it be that we need to create the climate for businesses to want to invest? Now, Honda pulling out, one of the talking points that you're hearing a lot of right now is, it's okay, we didn't sink any money into it, so the taxpayers aren't out any money. Well, that is mainly true. This was a lot of tax incentives, and the plan had to actually be executed for Honda to get taxpayer dollars here, or relief from taxes. We still spent a lot of money on this. This was a sales pitch. Canada was up against China to get that EV battery factory. You don't think the Chinese flashed a little money around? And if they did we? The announcement alone, where Justin Trudeau flew in with half the cabinet to announce this big battery factory in Alliston, Ontario. How much did we spend on that? To say that the taxpayers didn't lose any money on this is dishonest, nearest I can tell, because I know that we spent money on that. It's sad that they're not going ahead with it. I mean, if I have to try and call it here, balls and strikes, I'm going to say this is mainly due to American tariffs. They really want to repatriate their auto industry, but I think that's part of the reason we need to get a deal done with the Americans. Just yesterday, Pierre Poilievre was talking about how we can have a new auto pact with the Americans. This is about 30 seconds long. Listen to this.
We have a real plan. Conservative plan is to bring back the auto pact, a zero tariff auto pact that requires makers make one car in Canada for every car they sell in Canada, and to offer for the Americans to have the same. That would bring production back to both of our countries, extremely attractive for both, and that's why we believe the Americans would sign on. Let's get rid of the GST for all Canadian-made automobiles, and let's end the $2.3 billion Liberal subsidy for foreign-made electric vehicles.
Hey, you just heard two different answers. You heard the Prime Minister, and you heard the guy who wants to be Prime Minister. Which one sounds like a more competent plan to you? Seems like Pierre has got a pretty good vibe on what's going to work with the Americans. And if I'm being honest, I mean, I'm not in the negotiating room, but it sounds like what Pierre is proposing is going to work great for them and for us. Let's go to another question here for Prime Minister Carney.
The CEO of Cenovus Energy this morning made some comments. I'm not sure if you saw them, but he said the national dialogue on further development of the oil sands has been myopically focused on the climate agenda and climate policy, and that investors have left Canada for more competitive jurisdictions. I'd like your thoughts, please.
Well, I start by observing the following, which is that the oil production in Canada, largely driven by the oil sands, is at a record high. It's moved up over the course of the last decade from 3 million barrels per day to over 5 million barrels per day. That brings great benefits to the country, but it also is a source of our emissions, is one of the biggest sources of our national emissions. And one of the factors, I'm going to anchor this in the discussion today, or what we're celebrating today, what AirAsia is doing, what Tony Fernandez has helped to lead. When you look at Asia, biggest, fastest growing market, crucial to the future of Quebec, future of Canada, is building those links. What they're looking for, and you see it in the choice of the A220, is not just efficiency, but low emissions. One of the selling factors is that emissions are 25% lower than previous, because they're looking for that efficiency over the long haul. And one of the factors, one of the key selling points for Canadian conventional energy will be that it's low risk. Canada is the lowest risk jurisdiction. Low cost, low marginal cost. We are continuing to work on that. And low carbon. And so getting the emissions down will put us in a position. And I will tell you that from direct conversations with a series of governments across Asia, that's what they're looking for the medium term. That's what the Government of Canada is working with the Government of Alberta in order to produce. A comprehensive approach through our MOU. We're making good progress on that, and that's going to make the oil sands more competitive. It's going to make Canada more competitive as part of a much bigger energy transition that's happening. And I can't speak, and I'll finish here, being in Quebec, without observing just the fundamental strength that's given from the clean energy that comes from this great province. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister Carney, he canceled the carbon tax as one of the first things that he did. He promised to cancel it, and when he got elected, he canceled it. He did that for electoral reasons, but I think that sent a message that's confusing to a lot of Canadians. Many might think that we've turned the page and we've got a serious prime minister now and everything is good. He is still very, very, very much an environmental ideologist. He's very much into green ideology, very, very similar to Justin Trudeau. Now, he doesn't talk about it in the same bold way that Justin Trudeau used to talk about green ideology, but make no mistake, the Prime Minister is still there. Low carbon oil is what he says the Asian countries want from us. He says the world wants our low-carbon oil. I'm not exactly sure what low-carbon oil is, but I'm going to suggest that we are handicapping ourselves if we try and put restrictions on it. Do people want Canadian oil? Yeah, damn right. Do they want it at a good price? You bet your butt. Do they care if it's low carbon? Not really. I don't think they do. If I'm being honest, this is green ideology, and the Prime Minister is again adding a layer of bureaucracy and expensive add-ins that need to that's going to hamstring the industry. I'm really concerned about what that's going to do. You know, I don't know that people necessarily take Canada seriously. Why would we make ourselves have to produce low-carbon oil when all of the other oil-producing nations aren't doing that? It's going to make Canadian oil more expensive. And if I'm being honest, I think that's part of the goal here. Let's move on to something else. AI. Yesterday, the Privacy Commissioner released a report that says Canadians' privacy may have been violated by AI. Well, here's our AI minister, Evan Solomon.
Look, we read the report, the Privacy Commissioner and the other commissioners' reports clearly. We appreciate the work they do across jurisdictions. I would say, let me note that OpenAI took steps in the wake of the April 23rd investigation that started to make the changes, which we do note that the Privacy Commissioner and the others were satisfied with that. We expect every single social media company to protect Canadians' identities, their privacy, and their data. And we'll be coming forward with a change to the framework to make sure that happens.
When?
Good question. Their environment's changing, as you know, AI chatbots. So very soon we'll be updating, along with many other elements, working with my counterparts on social media, to make sure that we keep Canadians' data safe. So we'll be updating the framework very soon.
Interesting comments. I'm not even sure how he's going to endeavor to do that, and that kind of makes me skeptical that it'll ever happen anyway. But one thing I am sure this Liberal government wants to do is they want to restrict the age limits for social media use. And I'm not sure that they want to do it because they really want to keep people safe. I think they want to do it because they think it'll be popular with parents. And for all I know, maybe it will be. Here's him talking about regulating social media.
70% of Canadians in a new poll released today say they're in favor of age restrictions for both social media and AI chatbots. Is that going to factor into your thinking on a potential age restriction?
We are looking very closely at all sorts of regulations around social media. You've talked to Mark Miller about it. Yeah, look, I'm a parent. We all know the harms of social media that have done, and we are looking very closely at making sure that we protect citizens and we get it right. And I've said this before, we're going to be open to the opportunities of technology, candid about the concerns, and you're going to see that. We're absolutely looking closely at that. Absolutely.
I don't necessarily have a problem with banning social media, but I think we need to have a talk about how this happens, the age that's appropriate to ban it, when we start phasing it in. What happens when somebody turns 16? Do they have to decide, am I going to open up an Instagram account or am I going to go get my G1? Is that how this works? I'm really not sure. And once we just throw them in as mid-teenagers into the social media world, are there any concerns that because they haven't grown up with it or they haven't been around it, that that's going to create an even more dangerous situation, that maybe they won't have those internet smarts that they're developing now at a younger age? Hey, listen, this is a conversation we can totally have, but I'd like to have it because we have the best of intentions in mind, not because we're looking to score political points. And unfortunately, with this government, it's usually just about the politics. Now I want to go to a committee hearing that was happening yesterday in Ottawa. Conservative Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton. He was talking to Department of Justice officials, and they made an interesting comment when it comes to mandatory minimum sentences. And this is not something that the news is giving a lot of attention to. Listen to this.
And this idea of just providing a way out for judges who fundamentally reject the idea of mandatory minimums, which parliamentarians have put in place time and time again, the idea of giving judges a button they can press if they feel like it's not fair to put a child pornographer behind bars. That's something that they have. So I want to talk about what this safety valve actually says. Because the safety valve in effect here, when imposing a sentence for an offense that has a minimum punishment of a specified term of imprisonment, a court shall impose a shorter term of imprisonment than the specified term, than the mandatory minimum, if in the circumstances the minimum punishment would amount to cruel and unusual punishment for that offender. To the officials, and again, it will sound like a very broad question, but I'm hoping you'll understand where I'm going, and if you're unclear, I'm happy to clarify. What does "in the circumstances" actually refer to? So when a judge is making this decision of whether a safety valve applies, what information are they permitted to or compelled to bring in as far as that assessment of circumstances?
Thank you for the question. So I think we can expect, because the threshold that was chosen for the safety valve was the constitutional standard of cruel and unusual punishment, I think we can expect courts to rely on the body of jurisprudence that's developed around Section 12 and look at examples of previous MMPs that had been struck down, situations in which those MMPs had been struck down. I think that's there will be a broad body of jurisprudence there for courts to rely on.
But just specifically here, so when it says also whether the minimum punishment would amount to cruel and unusual punishment for that offender. So deciding whether it's cruel and unusual punishment isn't just deciding based on the facts of the crime. It's deciding, as I read that, based on the circumstances of the offender. So what exactly is being drawn into that assessment?
So I think we could expect courts to look at the circumstances of the offense, the degree of responsibility of the offender, the sort of types of factors that courts are used to analyzing when reaching a proportionate sentence.
Would an offender's immigration status be considered?
So I think as part of this analysis, I think they would be looking at all of the circumstances surrounding that particular offender and offense.
So an offender, so a judge who believes that, an offender's immigration status could be jeopardized by upholding the mandatory minimum, that could be factored into cruel and unusual punishment being determined?
Thanks for the question. I'll jump in on that one. So the courts have been pretty clear, and we've talked about it at this committee before, in Supreme Court decision in FAM, the role that collateral consequences can play in sentencing. Sentencing courts are allowed to take into consideration collateral consequences of a sentence, whether that be immigration status, whether that be employment status. But what they cannot do when they take into consideration those consequences is adjust the sentence in a way that would result in the sentence being unfit for that particular offender.
And when determining whether the circumstances are cruel and unusual, that there's nothing in Section 718.41, there's nothing in the safety valve that compels judges to look at the effect it will have on victims and their rights, correct?
I think in, as Ms. Bird has talked about, in assessing whether a particular sentence would be cruel and unusual in the constitutional context, they're going to look at the seriousness of the offense. In looking at the seriousness of the offense, the gravity of the offense, I think that would provide an opportunity for them to consider aspects related to the victim.
I'm going to stop it there. I know that was long and it was dry. I mean, it's the Justice Committee. So let me try and put a bow on what was being discussed there. They're talking about legislation. They're talking about mandatory minimum sentences. And some judges will go out of their way to try and find a way to not impose the mandatory minimum sentence for that crime if they can figure out that it would amount to cruel and unusual punishment. And when MP Andrew Lawton here asked, would their immigration status factor into that decision, the answer was yes, it could. In other words, if the mandatory minimum sentence for carrying a gun is 1 year in jail, if a judge determines that that could impact someone's immigration status and possibly make them get deported or possibly not allow them to achieve Canadian citizenship, they don't have to impose the mandatory minimum sentence. And do we take into account how the victims feel? No, we don't really. That's what the Liberals were trying to slide in with a sub-amendment at the Justice Committee. The ability for judges to be able to consider someone's immigration status in overruling or overturning a mandatory minimum sentence. Maybe they don't know what mandatory or minimum means, but I'm going to suggest that if our lawmakers determine you should do at least 1 year in jail for having child porn, why would a judge overrule that? That's what our lawmakers, duly elected, have decided. It's another debatable one. How about that? Let's leave it at that's another debatable one. Friends, I'm going to end it on this. There's a lot of reason to think the conflict in Iran is winding down. It seems like the Iranians are now ready to make a deal. And that would be great because then we can get on the road to recovery when it comes to gas prices. President Trump has been working pretty hard to try and work out this deal. But yesterday, he did a ceremony at the White House where he was honoring military mothers. And he told a fairly relatable story. I get that a lot of people don't like this guy, but this is one that I think a lot of people could relate to. Listen to this.
I love the name Melody because for a long time, they have spell correct and word correct on these crazy machines that we use to put out truths, or they used to be called tweets. And every time I wrote Melania, it would correct to Melody. So I do things, and I work very fast, very fast. Blah, 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 and I talk about it, and I say, and Melania is fantastic, and happy Mother's Day, Melania, our great First Lady, Melania, but it would spell correct and word correct to Melody, and sometimes I wouldn't proofread it, and I'd say, and I would get just absolute decimated. These people would decimate. They said he didn't know the name of his wife. He keeps calling her. And I said, what the hell is wrong with this machine? I didn't know about that little feature, but I got that corrected eventually. You know who corrected? The military. I said, come here, you got to correct this. You're killing me. I took more abuse. She's been called Melody a lot. Anyway, I had to explain it to you this way. I stood up here to explain it to you. I apologize.
That's kind of cute. And you know what? There are just some names that spell check or autocorrect just cannot get right. I thought that was fun. All right, friends, like I said, it's a shorter episode today. My schedule is taking me in a lot of different places, so I'm going to leave it at this. But I will be back in less than 24 hours with a listener DMs episode of Scott Fox After 9. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and I'll catch you right back here tomorrow. As always, I will leave you with the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now.